Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really getting into something critical for Washington state: housing. Just where things stand right now.
Absolutely. It's a huge topic, and you've pulled together some really interesting sources for us to look at.
Yeah, we have an OPB news piece on that new rent control bill, a Como News transcript with arguments, for and against it.
And that big State of the State's Housing 2024 report from the Washington Center for Real Estate Research. That one's packed with data.
Exactly. So the mission here is to pull out the key stuff, the really vital insights. We want you to get a clear picture of the affordability issues, the new laws, without getting totally buried in numbers.
Right. Let's try and make sense of it all. Where should we start? Maybe with the scale of the problem.
Good idea. That WCRER report, it lays it out pretty starkly from the get-go. Affordable housing is a major, major challenge.
It really is. I mean, the numbers are quite something. Nearly half of all renters in Washington, they're spending over 30% of their income just on housing.
That's already a huge chunk, but it gets worse.
It does. A quarter of renters, 1 in 4, are paying over 50%. Just think about that. Over half your income gone before you even think about food, transport, anything else.
That kind of pressure, it's not sustainable for people.
Yeah.
And you see the direct link to homelessness, right? The report really connects those dots.
Yeah, it explicitly says rising housing costs are a big driver. And the growth in unsheltered homelessness is particularly worrying. What was the figure?
75%. As of 2023, 3/4 of the homeless population were unsheltered. It just shows the severity.
It really does. And it's not just renters feeling the squeeze, although they're hit hard.
No, absolutely not. Homeownership, that dream is getting further away for a lot of middle-income families, too. You got high interest rates making mortgages expensive.
It's just not enough homes on the market to begin with. That limited supply keeps prices high.
Plus, Washington keeps growing. We crossed 8 million people in 2024, and more people keep coming, which, just adds more pressure.
It's this fundamental imbalance, isn't it? Supply just isn't keeping up with demand. And that's the backdrop for a lot of the debate, especially around things like rent control.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into that rent control debate. It's been front and center recently. The state legislature did just pass a rent control bill.
Right, that's the OPB news focus.
Yeah.
The idea, obviously, is to try and keep rents more affordable for tenants, stop those huge jumps year on year.
But it's controversial. That Como News transcript we have really captures the pushback.
It does. You have folks like Jay Parker arguing pretty strongly that rent control is basically the wrong solution.
Their point is focus on building more housing. That's the real answer, they say.
And the worry is that this rent control law will actually discourage developers from building new units. Fewer new homes means fewer jobs, less tax revenue. That's the argument.
It's a classic tension. What was interesting, though, was the comment from the Washington Landlord Association in that Como piece.
Oh, right. They hinted they might have supported the bill if that 7% annual cap was removed.
Which suggests maybe they weren't against all the renter protections in the bill, just that specific cap. It's kind of nuanced.
Yeah, it makes you wonder about the specifics of the final bill, what actually got passed. You found some details on that, didn't you?
I did, yeah, from a discussion online. The approved bill caps run hikes at 7% plus inflation.
Okay, so it's tied to inflation, but with a floor.
Right. But there's also a ceiling. The total increase can't be more than 10% in a year.
And what about new buildings? That concern about discouraging construction?
They addressed that, it seems. New buildings are exempt from the cap for the first 12 years, a sort of grace period to encourage developers, perhaps.
Interesting. So a cap, but with some flexibility and an exemption for new supply. It's trying to thread a needle, maybe.
Seems like it. But okay, rent control is one piece. The WCRER report spends a lot of time on the other side, boosting supply.
Yeah, it talks about planning. Communities are actually required to plan for affordable housing in their big comprehensive plans.
And those fast-growing counties, they have to do these buildable lands reports, basically checking if they have enough land zoned for future growth.
And what do those reports generally find? Do we have the land?
Well, broadly speaking, yes. The big 7 counties, Clark, King, Kitsap, Pierce, Snohomish, Thurston, Whatcom, they report having enough buildable land overall for the growth that's projected.
Okay, so land itself isn't the bottleneck. or not the only one?
It seems more complicated. The report flags that within those counties, some specific cities or areas might not have enough capacity, especially for certain types of housing.
Like residential versus jobs, maybe.
Sure.
Different density levels.
Exactly. The appendix mentions Everett having a residential shortfall, for example. So it suggests the issue isn't just raw land, but maybe zoning rules, infrastructure availability, sewer, water, or maybe even local opposition to denser development.
Right. The practicalities of actually building on that land.
And the state legislature has definitely been busy trying to tackle some of those practicalities. Lots of pro-housing bills passed in 23 and 24.
What kind of things?
Things like requiring higher minimum densities in many areas, allowing ADUs, accessory dwelling units, like backyard cottages in single-family zones.
Oh, yeah, the missing middle housing push.
Exactly. And trying to streamline the permitting process, make it faster to get projects approved. There's also a 2024 law about allowing co-housing in multifamily zones.
Co-housing, interesting. What else?
Oh, and a tax break for converting office buildings into apartments. Trying to repurpose existing space.
That makes sense with changing work patterns.
Yeah.
But when do these changes actually kick in?
That's the catch. Many of them don't take full effect until cities update their comprehensive plans. And things like the middle housing and ADU rules for the Puget Sound area, that's June 2025.
So we won't see the real impact on the ground for a little while yet. It's a longer-term play.
Seems that way. And all this is happening against a backdrop of, economic shifts.
Right. The WCRUR report gives context there, too.
Mm-hmm.
Population growth, like you said, is steady statewide. Clark County is growing fastest percentage-wise.
And incomes.
Incomes are up, too. Median household income hit $99,000 in mid-2024. That's an 18% jump in just 3 years.
Wow. So more people are earning more money?
Yes. More households are in those higher income brackets, over $75,000 a year. But there's a big but.
The disparities.
Exactly. Figure 8 in the report is pretty stark. The income gap between Asian-headed households and other racial groups is actually getting wider. So prosperity isn't being shared equally.
That's a really important point. Okay, what about the rental market specifically? How have things looked there recently?
Well, interestingly, all the new apartment construction we've seen has actually helped slow down rent growth. It averaged about 3.6% per year from 2022 to 2024, which is slower than before.
So adding supply did have some effect on prices.
It appears so. And vacancy rates are back to more normal levels, too, not super tight like they were for a while.
What about the cost of building? Did that ever come back down after the pandemic spike?
It flattened out in 2023, which is good. But it didn't drop back to pre-2020 levels. Construction is still more expensive than it used to be.
So more expensive to build, even if land is theoretically available? You can see how these factors compound.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which brings us right back to affordability, doesn't it?
Yeah, let's look at those affordability indexes the report uses, the HAIs. They basically compare median incomes to housing costs.
And they show a really different story for renters versus buyers.
How so?
Well, for the median income renter, affordability has actually stayed relatively stable. Manageable, maybe not great, but stable.
Okay, but for buyers?
Oof, big drop. Home buying affordability for the median income household has plummeted. And for first-time buyers, the report says it's been unaffordable since way back in 2012.
Over a decade, wow.
Yeah, and critically, even for renters, that stability is only for the median. The report has a model for a low-income renter household.
And how does that look?
Still mostly unaffordable. It really highlights that averages can hide a lot of pain at the lower end of the income scale.
Which connects back to those cost burden figures we mentioned earlier. Nearly half of renters spending over 30% of income on housing, a quarter spending over 50%.
Exactly. And federal help, like housing vouchers, they only reach about a quarter of the households who are actually eligible.
Yeah.
There's a huge gap in assistance.
It just feels like a pressure cooker. And inevitably, that pressure leads to homelessness for some.
The trends there are really concerning. Figure 33 shows that steady climb, a 42% increase in homelessness between 2014 and 2023.
Reaching about 31,000 people estimated by 2024.
And again, that unsheltered number, 75% in 2023, is just, it's deeply troubling. It shows the safety net, including shelter capacity, isn't keeping up.
So pulling this all together, it's complex. Washington's housing situation is really multifaceted.
Definitely. We've got efforts to boost supply. We've got this new rent control law trying to manage costs. But affordability is still a massive issue for renters, for potential homeowners.
And especially for people on lower incomes, the homelessness crisis really underscores that. The need seems huge.
It suggests that, beyond supply measures and rent regulations, we probably need significantly more direct support, more subsidies, to really address the needs of the most vulnerable.
So for you listening, why does this matter? Well, if you live in Washington, or you're thinking about moving here, these dynamics hit close to home. They affect your budget, your choices, the kind of community you live in.
Yeah, understanding this interplay market forces, government action, the economy, is pretty crucial for navigating life here. It's shaping the state's future.
Which leads to maybe a final thought to chew on.
Okay.
With rent control now in place, alongside these ongoing pushes to build more, but with this persistent affordability crisis, what's the long-term impact actually going to be?
Yeah, how will it affect the quality of housing,
Yep.
the availability, and, crucially, will the impacts be felt evenly? Or will some groups benefit more, while others maybe face new challenges?
It's definitely something to watch. How this all unfolds will really shape Washington in the years to come. Something to keep in mind as you look at your own situation and the state around you.